Well, it's Friday the 4th of December. This is episode 2048 of 301 Permanently Moved.online, a personal podcast 301 seconds in length, written, recorded and edited in 1 hour by me at the JMO. It's been a weird week, oscillating wildly from intensive periods of focus and effort, contrasted with 2 whole days where I did absolutely nothing. On those days, I struggled to open any tool on my laptop that had the potential to be a space for productivity or creativity. I spent yesterday beating myself up for not doing anything. The only thing I did do was binge on my backlog of people exploring abandoned mine videos. Eve then reminded me last night that I've just finished NanoWriMo and I haven't had a day off since October, which is fair enough actually. I talked about NanoWriMo in episode 2044 and how it's helped me come to terms with my dyslexia. I completed it again this year, and now have about 2/3 of a solarpunk novel under my belt. It's about smugglers in East Kent dealing with the plague, interpersonal BS, and ongoing climate shocks in the early 2100s. For the first time this year, going into NanoWriMo, I had a plan. I used the classic 3-act, 9-block, 27-chapter outlining method. I had a word count target for every chapter and a clear idea of scenes, the plot, and character progression. I'm quite pleased with how the story was going. But finishing up November with 1/3 of the story still unwritten was surprising, and I've learnt a lot. Off the top of my head, here are some of my learnings. 1. Word count targeting chapter lengths is good for NanoWriMo, but impractical for actually telling a story. For example, chapter 15's drama had been penciled in with the following line: "The flood occurs." The narrative grew to fit the concept. The idea that I'd only spend 2k words writing about a devastating flood set in my hometown was naive. It wasn't enough words to contain the drama at all. On the other hand, Chapter 3 was drafted as, "Goes to work the next day, everyone is subdued." This was barely a scene, let alone a whole chapter. So some lessons learned around pacing versus word count. 2. I found sustaining a single point of view narrative for a whole novel really hard. In fact, there were times when even I thought that my main character was actually quite dull. So I introduced a new character quite early on, writing in the form of an email missive to an off-screen entity. They attached a few PDFs from the Margate Historical Society, which meant I had unlocked a way of info dumping in a fun and interesting way. I'm going to continue to write the book and finish the whole story from A to Z with the main character in January. In the rewrite, I'm going to go back and introduce more characters in a mosaic style, inspired by Kim Stanley Robinson's most recent The Ministry for the Future. With the whole narrative spine of the story already written, I'm hoping it's going to be easy to add in more points of view. 3. A few days were a struggle creatively, trying to get the words out and onto the page, but the physical graft of sitting down and typing was not a blocker this year. I have, however, hurt my wrist. I must have written something like 75 to 80k words this month. As a result, the RSI I first developed working in a shared service centre during the noughties has flared up again. Doing NanoWriMo and starting a blog series about the metaverse, D-Web and SupportNet may or may not have been a mistake. 4. Word counts, targets and pacing work well for me. NanoWriMo reminds me of this every year. Then it dissolves away as the weeks and months go by. The learning drifts into a cloud of forgetting. Lastly, this is the first year that I've been thinking about the editing process as I've been writing. Having planned it out, as I wrote the chapters, it all dissolved down into scenes. And for the first time, I now understand the utility of Scrivener as a writing tool, particularly the index card view and the ability to move scenes around on the fly. I think this feature is going to be invaluable in the second drafting process as I try and reshape it from a single narrative point of view to a mosaic. So yeah, November was pretty good. And through the act of doing that, I am once again reminded that I'm one of those people who thrives on momentum and routine. The more effort I put into a single task, the more creative ideas seem to flare off into other areas of interest. I once spoke to an artist whose work I really admire about this creative phenomenon, and they said that if you are in that spot, you just have to let it all pour out. Stay with that effort, stay in the moment, and capture all of the ideas with a net for as long as possible. Because if you lose momentum, or set that moment aside, even for a hot minute, it will escape you. This feast of creativity in the last month or so has resulted in some long hours, working and typing well after Eve had gone to bed. But being in this creative fugue state was a very pleasurable way to spend lockdown too. But I also deeply appreciate that this experience has not been the same for everyone. And I'm thankful that I had the time and space to be able to do that. And it's kind of thanks to you guys. Thanks for listening. If you regularly enjoy my writing or podcasts, please consider supporting the show at www.thejmo.net/support.